You're listening to the new media. You're listening to Mitchell Talks. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter at MitchellTalks. The News9 Sessions. I have no idea what we're going to talk about because I was trying to get out of my car. I'd driven into a creek. I'm just kidding. Did you guys see the Darwin Awards this week? Yeah. We had some finalists in Oklahoma.
Yeah, we did.
And to be honest, I mean, I covered a bunch of them, and the rain was coming down real hard. It's unlike anything that I've seen in a long time here. And for a lot of folks, they're driving along. The rain kind of comes out of nowhere, and before they know it, they're waist deep in water. So, I can kind of see it. I don't think we talked with anybody who said, you know what, I'm going to try to drive through that water. Although we did see a few of them on the air later on that were trying to drive through it, which not real smart. Just don't do that.
No, not smart at all. It came up to the windows of minivans yesterday. Don't drive through that. What are you doing?
It's common sense.
Hit reverse. Go backwards. Go another different way. There's got to be another way to go where you're going.
You know what I enjoy is at some point, David Payne's head is going to explode.
Cumulus clouds!
Oh, man.
Cumulus clouds!
He hates that driving into water thing. I mean, he just about loses his mind. He reminds me of a guy that's just kind of at the end.
Well, he's funny because he doesn't pull punches. We'll show a video of somebody driving in, and he's like, hey, don't be a moron, turn around, kind of a thing. It's really funny.
It's insane. Which leads us to, you want to talk about weed?
Let's talk about weed, man.
Why not? We're in this array.
Dude.
Yeah. So there's going to be you covered the event last weekend, right?
I did.
All right. So who were the people that were there?
I met some interesting people. As I was walking into it, the event that you're talking about is the convention, and I forget the long name for it, but basically it's the medical marijuana convention. And the reason that they chose to have it here in Oklahoma is because Oklahoma is a very red, very conservative state. And the belief is if we can pass it here, we can pass it anywhere. And medical marijuana, again, it's passed in about 30 different states right now, but there are some states that are holding out. But the belief is if it'll pass here, it can pass any place. And talked with a guy, ran into a guy as I was walking into the convention center, and he kind of looked like what you would picture your average stoner to be. Just a little scrawny guy. He had a mohawk and just, kind of, dude.
Like the Wall Street guy, right?
Dude, kind of a thing. Not really what you would expect to be a business person. So just got to chatting with him a little bit. And the guy, first of all, was brilliant. And he was explaining to me that he was the guy that invented the process for extracting cannabis oil from cannabis using butane. So this device that he made that looks very much like an old still that you would see in Arkansas back in the 1920s, he uses that to extract oil from cannabis and patented it, and it's being used in these CBD oil places all over the country. As a result of the money that he made from that, he bought several CBD dispensaries, both in California and in Colorado. And the guy could probably buy and sell everybody in this room about 20 times over. Went from being a stoner who was mowing lawns as a cover for selling weed to being a multimillionaire X times over by creating this device. And that was kind of the moral of the story, is that we're still on the ground floor of the whole CBD deal right now. It's a real hot commodity. It's something that people are talking about. And the purpose of this meeting was to show people how to capitalize on it, how to make money from it. And it was really pretty fascinating. We also we talked with a gentleman. A guy walks up to me, and same thing, kind of skinny guy, muscular, long beard. He comes up to me and he starts striking up conversation with me. And he takes out his phone and he shows me a picture. And it's a picture of a pretty heavy-set guy who is paralyzed. He's in a wheelchair. And he says, yeah, this guy, want to tell you a bit about him. He is former Navy seaman. He was gathering intelligence in Pakistan. And while he was gathering intelligence, a bomb exploded and did some very serious damage to him. He was left unable to walk. He's left paralyzed. The picture that he showed me, the gentleman, is pretty large because he can't walk around, he can't exercise, but he's a pretty heavy set guy. Became hopelessly addicted to opioids. The VA was sending him tons and tons of drugs every single month. He gets addicted to these opioids. He's ready to kill himself. He's ready to commit suicide. and he can't find the bullets to the gun. And he exhausts himself so much looking for the bullets that he passes out and he vomits, and it's a horrible, horrible deal. And the next day he wakes up and he says, you know what, I'm going to spend the next 5 years not killing myself, trying to find something better than what I'm doing. And over those 5 years, he was introduced to cannabis tar. And within a little while of just taking the cannabis tar, he weans himself off the opioids. And the guy that's telling me this says to me, and that guy, that's me. So he's walking around, he's tossing his kids in the air, and he was told just a few years ago he'd never walk again. But he got himself off the opioids, onto this cannabidiol medication, and now he's doing fine.
We can blame Eccles, right? I mean, CBD was, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Passing on. I mean, they're everywhere. These shops are everywhere.
Yeah. And Eccles, I talked with him a little bit, and he's going to be, he's helping to oversee how this is going to be regulated. We were talking a bit about this last week in terms of the legislature left early, 3 weeks early, presumably to campaign, and in doing so left without making any rules or regulations governing 788 should 788 pass. And Eccles is saying, well, we have been working behind closed doors, those of us in leadership, and we're coming up with rules and regulations for this. So it'll be interesting to see what those rules are. I mean, will it be you can only use it if you're stage 4 cancer? Or will it be you can use it for pain? Or you can use it for any number of different things? It'll be interesting to see how they regulate it and how many regulations they put on it. Some of the people that we were talking with over at this convention were saying the concern they have is that Oklahoma legislature is going to overregulate it. And they say that happens in every state. The legislature will overregulate it, see there aren't a whole lot of problems, and then slowly back it off a little bit and back down those regulations. One of the pluses they said is that so many other states have done it that we can replicate what these other states have done in terms of legislation. But one of the things that was said to me that nobody has said before is, one of the questions that I asked is this a slippery slope for recreational marijuana? And the guy that I was talking to said, you're damn right it is. It's exactly what it is. He says we need to have recreational marijuana. The less that we have government intrusion on what we're doing, the better. So it was a very interesting conversation.
If you put everybody on a lie detector and you said, is this the first step towards getting recreational? A lot of the officials that are for this would say, oh, absolutely
No.
But at that point, their lie detector would be going off, right?
It'd be going through the roof. And, be honest with us. If that's what it is, that's what it is. And you and I have talked about this. If that's the case, there are so many different funding streams for the state if this thing passes on a recreational basis. And, neither one of us are people that would normally be smoking pot anyhow. But we're both also people who believe in folks' freedom to do what they want to do, even if that means smoke a little bit of pot.
Libertarian strain.
Yeah. But there's so much money that can be made from this on so many different levels, between the production of it, to the sale of it, to the licensing of it. It's a huge moneymaker. And that's what a lot of these folks were telling me at this convention, is that once the legislature sees after a year that nobody's eating anybody's face off, and the amount of money that can be made as a result of this, a lot of legislators who were very anti-pot all of a sudden are going to be pretty pro-pot.
Last week, I had a couple of folks that responded to our podcast. One of them was running for Attorney General, and we were going back and forth talking about some issues, and then it came around to the weed thing. I'm wondering, do you guys think maybe this 788 might start to swamp the other races in terms of coverage? Because this is dinging off the scale, right? And a lot more exciting than some of these other races.
Optometry. Yeah, it's a lot more exciting than any of the other state questions, maybe apart from the education state question, which may or may not make it on the ballot. We'll get to that a little later, I would assume. But yeah, I think it's going to swamp a lot of the races, a lot of the races across the board, whether it's Attorney General, whether it's the governor, whether it is your district or Senate race that's going to happen this year. It's certainly going to be something because of all the things that we just talked about. I mean, the money, the idea that it may or may not help sick people, the idea that is the state going to be set up in time to do this? Are doctors going to have options they think they need? Speaking of, this morning, which is a Friday morning for us, Catherine Sweeney in the Journal Record wrote a very good article about the breakdown and the split of the argument between the two sides, which are, is the state going to have the faculty to do it, and do doctors need less restriction to better keep up with research for their patients? Very good article, so I'll plug her for that.
And I think you're absolutely right. This is going to monopolize, I think, the headlines during the last legislative session. All we were talking about was budget and education because we had a teacher walkout. We had a whole bunch of teachers at the Capitol, and this kind of went on the back burner. Pardon the pun.
Here we go again.
I know, man. It's too easy. It really is.
You got to be a little bit more blunt.
Yeah.
Well, we got to weed out some of these jokes.
Yeah.
But the reality is that this is what people are talking about today, and I think you're right. I think that's what's going to take over, especially because a lot of these primary elections that we're seeing are, frankly, kind of boring.
It's also a snappy topic. It's also one that grabs people's attention. There's a lot of, both myth and rumor around the idea of marijuana in general and medical marijuana, and so I think it grabs a lot of people's attention right away.
Well, that's just your opinion, man. Which I should also point out that when you're listening to this, we're now releasing this on Fridays. Dead Center is going to have a Big Lebowski showing down at 612 tonight, a pajama party, Amy Young and those folks. So, by the way, I lost my train of thought. So one of the folks that's for the Yes campaign, I won't say who it is, was talking about your story the other day. And I said, we're going to start doing a lot of these Facebook Lives. I know you guys are going to cover the story. And this unnamed official was like, all right, that stoner was not representative of where we're going, which made me think optics. Right, I recall my Leslie Stahl story. This was 1986, height of Iran-Contra. CBS, Leslie Stahl was covering the White House. She does a story about Reagan losing it. She said he may be losing it, he's losing control.
I remember that.
Just going crazy, and the B-roll was Reagan at his inauguration, Reagan at the Statue of Liberty, Reagan at Normandy, Reagan with the families of the Challenger, and on and on and on. Mike Deaver, the late great spin master with the Reagan campaign, calls Leslie Stahl as she tells the story and says, great story. She says, I know that you're really ticked off at me about this. And they went into this deal. She goes, no. You people have never gotten it. They don't listen to what you're saying, Leslie. They just finish it out, right? They just look at the pictures.
They like the pretty pictures.
Yeah. And so I could tell this person was, wow. They saw Aaron's story. They saw the dude that didn't look like that he was a Wall Street banker, right? And they were concerned because that's how these campaigns can switch on a dime from just something on a videotape and people go, yeah, I wasn't sure, but maybe these are the folks that are for it. And the Pro 788 folks are going to be working very hard to put a corporate face on this and a doctor face on this. I saw that the faith leaders are coming out, big group of faith leaders coming out against 788. In fact, by the time you hear this, we've done a Facebook Live at News9 with Blake Gideon, who's the pastor at First Baptist. I also saw the Pro 788 guys put out a piece responding to the pastors, talking about how it's used in Israel, for example, and how most of it's consumed in pill form, and it actually citing biblical references to what's going on. It's going to be fascinating. I hate to be one of these other candidates trying to break through that noise.
That's really pretty cool. I didn't realize that all that was going on. But you're right. The rhetoric, I think, is going to start ramping up quite a bit. And it's going to be fun to watch, honestly, on both sides.
And you talk to a lot of specifically the pro side of this, which are the people knocking door to door in tie-dye T-shirts, with long gray ponytails. They fit the description of somebody who isn't in a weed culture, doesn't know anybody who uses it medically, whether it's obviously prescribed or not in any state. But those people fit their idea of what a stoner is. And it's an optics problem. It just is. They're not going to win this on their merits without having somebody in front that people think they can trust, that breaks the mold in some sense. It is just politics.
And I think that's fair. When I was approached by the first guy over at the convention, again, my first thought is, dude, what's up, man? Get a pizza. And this guy was bright. As he was explaining to me the process of moving the cannabis oil from the cannabis using butane. I mean, he's using terms that are way, 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 way over my head, which is
that a
pretty
renewable
easy to
energy source? Are we working that story in?
Actually, that it can be used as a renewable energy source too. But it was, I mean, the guy was just really bright. But you're right. When you look at him, you're thinking, okay, this is a stoner with a mohawk. And the guy was brilliant. The guy is richer than God. He's extremely successful in what he's doing, but he's not what should be the face of this.
There's also a flip side of this. So the No campaign can be perceived as far too corporate, far too tucked in, far too stuffy and behind the times, depending on who they make the real face of this thing when we get probably past the primaries here. So it'll be interesting to watch that too, because that'll drive away millennials, speaking as one, from their cause. It will just drive this generation, probably a lot of Gen Xers as well, who have probably used, I would assume. I mean, it's a pretty common drug. So I think that could backfire on them as well if they go too corporate and too stuffy.
Here's the Yes on 788 campaign. Has Dr. Sunil Agarwal. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's going to be in Oklahoma this weekend, today in Tulsa, and tomorrow in Norman at the Get Out the Vote rally, which, by the way, Get Out the Vote is something we ought to talk about. See what happened in California. Democrats all upset. They ain't turning out to vote, right? So this is a Muskogee doctor. He's born in Muskogee, graduated from Oklahoma School of Science and Math. Those are smart people coming out of there, okay? And he's for the 788, folks. He says his professional, medical, and scientific work is in the use of cannabis in clinical practice, medical research, and educational settings. So the doctor debate begins. The faith debate is going to be beginning. And I'm wondering if you're running for lieutenant governor or something like that, if you think you're ever going to get any attention. It's going to be tough.
Probably not, and that's depending on the candidate. That might be what you want. You would like less eyes on your record, less eyes on your campaign, and just have it come down to name recognition. Then you just flood every airwave, every page, every website you can find.
Can I take a shout out to you, Mr. Brilbeck? I went to the Tower Theater. Which, by the way, Steven Tyler and those guys at the Tower Theater are starting to have these debates. These are debates that would not be ordinarily, number one, broadcast or even held. And you were one of the panelists the other night with the labor commissioner race. Right. I wasn't sure if I was there to watch a labor commissioner race debate or a commissioner of mental health. It was like there was two different topics on the table.
You're right.
And I'm just wondering, that's another one of those races where you wonder how informed people are going to be when they go to vote.
It's one of those where I think it's going to boil down to name recognition quite a bit. People are going to walk into the ballot box. They're going to say, oh, I know this person, and pull the lever. Kathy Costello, obviously her passion right now is mental health, and we all know why. Her son, who has mental health issues, had killed her husband, who was the former commissioner. And that's become her mission in life, is to combat mental illness. And she wants to do that by running for labor commissioner. She says, and I think she's right, one of the major issues that we have with labor, not just in Oklahoma, but throughout the country, is mental illness. It leads to absenteeism. It leads to problems in the workplace. So she wants to work to curb that. On the other side, Leslie Osborne, we all know Leslie. Leslie, when you walk into a room, you know that person who thinks they're the smartest person in the room? Leslie's really that person. She knows the budget, the state budget, inside and out. She already has connections within the legislature. Obviously, she's respected within the legislature. So either one could be a very good candidate. This could be one to watch. And I think they both did a great job, honestly.
Can I take a step back and ask a broader question? It's along what you asked, Scott, is that if you watched yesterday's education forum that happened down in Norman, Alex Cameron from News9 hosted that. There was a lot of talk about criminal justice reform being related to education. There was mental health, which is related to workforce, which is related to career tech and education. It looks like when you get into these debates, it's so difficult for the candidates to stay within that topic. Is that because they have other agendas, do you think, or is that because the state is so broken that all of it touches everything else?
I think the answer is the latter. I think that you can't just, as a candidate for anything, just address education. it is a broken state. It's a horrible thing to say, but it's a broken state. And everything, it's a house of cards. Everything is leaning against each other. So education, as we know, the better people are educated, the less likely they are to go to prison. Incarcerations rates are directly related to dropout rates. So those two are related. Mental health also. If you have mental health issues, it's difficult to get through school, and you're more likely, especially in Oklahoma where we don't have enough mental health facilities, you're more likely to wind up in prison. So all of these are intertwined. You really can't tackle one without the other. But you bring up a really good point. I mean, 10 years ago, if we had the same discussion, the discussion would be, okay, we're debating education. We're going to stick with education. And I think we've kind of evolved to realize that all of them are intertwined.
Sure. I mean, I agree that I asked the question already knowing my answer, but I just want to get some insight. I agree with you that all these things are connected, and we've kicked the can so far down the road that they've all funneled into each other, and it's one giant mess of needs that we can't fill. And I think as candidates, it's probably overwhelming. And I think as for voters, that's going to be very overwhelming coming to both the ballot box in June here and then in November.
But here's the deal, too, is that the easiest answer for a lot of these candidates is, well, we need more funding. And the funding isn't necessarily always the answer. We need more leadership. We need better ideas. And that's something that we're kind of lacking. Again, you've heard the old cliche. It's if you buy me a Ferrari, it doesn't make me a better driver. Very same type of thing. We do need money to fund these certain things, but at the same time, they've got to be run properly. Again, look at the health department. When we've lost 30 million, we found 30 million, we lost 30 million, we found it. It's just poor use of money is not going to help anybody. We've got to have the proper leadership in, and we've got to have the proper ideas in.
Sure.
Should also say that my hat's off, no pun intended there, to Keith Swinton, who was the third.
He did a good job.
And he kept his hat on the whole time.
The hat joke is because he wears a cowboy hat pretty much every place he goes.
Yeah.
Keith Swinton is a bright guy. He really is. And I think he handled himself. He's kind of the underdog in this race. But he answered the questions. He knows his stuff. And good dude. I liked him.
Yeah.
And on a personal level, I like him a lot. He's a good guy.
He came across as likable as could be.
Yeah. You can't help but like him.
Absolutely. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I mentioned Tower Theater, but Trey Savage at Non-Doc, again, put this together.
Yep.
We were at the Dead Center party last night. There were 10 people in there with Trey Savage haircuts. I've even got a picture of one.
He's a trendsetter. That's what it is.
That implies that Trey Savage actually gets haircuts.
Well, there's some sort of styling going on there. He just doesn't want you to know that.
There's some styling.
So also Claire Donnelly from KGOU was there, and Brianna Bailey from The Frontier, who we did a podcast with her a few months ago. It's a great one. I hope you listen to that. Anything happened with our AG friends this week? Or is it all quiet on that front? I see the commercials are running hot and heavy again.
Yeah, they haven't really launched too many more personal attacks on each other, which is kind of what we in journalism look for. Where we're always looking for a good fight, kind of a thing. And I haven't seen anything more. It hasn't really ramped up since last week, anyhow, has it?
I don't think so. And I think the response from that initial set of campaign ads, specifically the one targeting Mike Hunter,
right?
Which you talked about as well. You just story on that one? You did that for us, right? Yep. Some of these days I'm sleeping when you do these things. I don't know. So your story was...
Most of my viewers are.
Then I fit right in. But I think how quickly this campaign slid into almost entirely negative ad driven drove a lot of people away. And then you get the news stories and the press coverage about it, and they take a step back from those things and maybe do less. There's a new one from the Hunter campaign out about Gettner Drummond that I saw, but that's the latest one I've seen. Drummond has gone almost completely positive about himself. So whether that's going to work or not to get voters out, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think honestly, after the presidential race, people are kind of war weary. It was fun to watch for a little while, but now we're sick and tired of these guys throwing mud, and especially in a state like Oklahoma, which tends to be a little bit friendlier than the average bear. We're tired of seeing that kind of bloodshed. Tell me what you're about. Tell me what you stand for, and let's move on.
I think they're war weary as far as the primaries go. They don't like their guys fighting their own guys.
Right.
Let's see what happens after the primaries. When you've got conservatives hitting liberals and liberals hitting conservatives, and you really line up on tribal lines, let's see how war weary people actually are.
But at the same time, when they're trying to get their name out there and trying to get in the news, especially when we're looking at 788, sometimes you got to stir the pot a little bit.
Right, exactly.
So the question is, and there's probably not an answer, but the question is, when do you know when to pull the trigger and when not to? When is it too much? When is it not enough?
This is why we're not campaign managers.
Exactly.
Speaking of the bear in the woods, or now back to the Reagan analogy. Well, that's a long time ago. Let me also say that
before my time.
Yeah, that's
before my time.
Definitely before your time.
By the way, the bear meat tastes great. Just ask Ron and Nancy. It's an old joke. All right. We should do a shout out real quick. We've mentioned Struley, Journal Record, Ted Struley, and Alex Cameron. Bow tie wearers both. And I said last week that I'm not sure. I would try one of these summer suits, but you'd be getting into Cameron territory.
You'd think it'd be less of a tie, but it's actually more. It really is.
It's a style thing, right?
It's like a sweater vest.
I couldn't pull it off.
Yeah.
Couldn't pull it off.
So, anyway, for Struley and Cameron, sounds like a law firm, doesn't it? A bow tie wearer law firm. The bear in the woods analogy. Let's go to Donald J. Trump. By the way, you guys know anybody that locally that does a real good Trump impression?
I don't, but there's a radio commercial that's been airing quite a bit for, is it Patriot Dodge or something? I don't know. But the guy that does it is really, really good.
He's probably some national.
I want to find out who he is because the guy's solid.
Some politicians are embracing Donald Trump. You found that curious in Oklahoma, or obviously we're Oklahoma? What's the answer there?
No, I mean, Trump has, I think the last time I checked, which was admittedly a few weeks ago, but like a 64% approval rating.
52 as of today.
As of today is 52. Okay, so I hadn't checked in a couple weeks. So 52 as of today, which is still 8 to 10 points higher than he is nationally. We were the first state to go for this president. Every county voted for him. Specifically, I know that Todd Lamb is hitching his horse to the Donald Trump wagon via Donald Trump Jr., but the Jr. is very small.
Trump is Trump.
But Trump is Trump, and this is Trump country, and I don't think hitching yourself to that wagon is going to hurt, specifically because evangelicals have not turned their backs on this president, and that's a massive voting base here in Oklahoma.
Right. And again, we're right now in Oklahoma for the past couple of years, we've been very economy focused because of the oil prices, because of the budget. Everything that we've been hearing on the news day in and day out is budget this, budget that, money this, money that, jobs this, jobs that. Like him or hate him, the fact is we under the Trump administration, we're seeing a lot of employment. We're seeing a strong economy. And that's what people here in Oklahoma are looking at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't fault him for that. One of his victories in these first 2 years has been the improvement of the economy while he's been president.
Right.
And so that's going to matter to people. So if you can, attach yourself to that kind of growth or promise that kind of growth and work with the federal government, I think that's probably at least a winning piece of the puzzle.
But honestly, the guy is, he's Teflon too. Yeah, you look at previous administrations, if there had been a scandal involving a porn star, it would have been history. With this guy, even the most staunch conservatives are saying, we'll let it go. And that's pretty remarkable.
How many panels went on this week? You said there's one that Alex did. There was the Okoga gubernatorial panel.
2 gubernatorial panels this week.
Either of you guys cover those?
Did not.
I did not. Steve Shaw did the Okoga one for us. That one was not open to the public. It was $50 for a ticket to get into that one. But it was along the usual lines. We haven't really had any debates yet, but I would really consider that we sussed out what candidates thought and how they were different from each other. I mean, the Education Forum yesterday, which is still up on the News9 Facebook page, all the candidates, Democrat and Republican, it was Connie Johnson, Drew Edmondson on the Democratic side, and Gary Jones and Mick Cornett on the Republican side, but they all had similar answers to say. Gary Richardson backed out of that forum. My guess is he would have been different. Todd Lamb did not attend that forum. His views on public education are vastly different from the 4 that were up there. So I think maybe once we get a little deeper into past primary, term here, we're going to see some of the more sussing out of who's where.
You think Todd Lamb is going to, at this point, back out a lot of these debates and kind of say, I'm just going to sort of try to coast to a victory and try to avoid any confrontation or gaffes, or because he's the guy right now that he's got a target on his back.
why fix it if it's not broken? I think that's exactly what his strategy is. And if I was a consultant, that's what I would tell him. Is that right now you're winning on name recognition, your ads are working, people know you, they believe in your record as lieutenant governor, which may or may not be true, depends on how you look at that. But I would not stick my candidate in front of a place that he could potentially set himself on fire.
Don't take a risk.
Exactly.
Well, we're number one. Switching to another topic.
We're number one.
We're number one. We're now past. We passed them people down south of us, down south of east of us, who are putting more people in jail than we were. We ain't putting. We're putting more than they are now. So Oklahoma's number one in incarceration across the United States. We're gonna have a ticker tape parade.
We got to do something, and it shouldn't be anything involving celebration. Joe Albaugh, I believe, is a huge resource to this state. We're very, very lucky to have him, and what little hair he has, I'm sure he's pulling out right now. We've got prisons that are bursting at the seams. We've got people who are incarcerated that, in my opinion, probably should not be incarcerated. We've got drug issues and mental health issues that we're not addressing because, frankly, it's a lot easier just to throw people away and warehouse them. But we've been doing that for so many years that the warehouses have gotten full. I did a story a little while ago, went down to Texas. You know, Texas, the other state, lock them up, throw them away the key kind of deal. Not anymore. Texas has put more of a focus and more resources toward mental health and drug rehabilitation. And the net result is they're closing down prisons while we're looking at spending $800 million to build 2 new ones. So they're doing something right down there. We're doing something wrong. And we should be trying to model what they're doing. And we are to a certain degree, but I don't think that we're picking it up and running far enough with it.
But it's certainly not in the way that Texas is. And I think this ranking is a direct consequence of really passing not as, how do I want to phrase this? What we passed for criminal justice reform was not exactly what voters voted on.
Right.
And with 780 and 781, and a lot of that had to do with defense attorneys' lobbies, with the DAs, with sheriffs. It was a lot of law enforcement sticking their foot into this thing, and we didn't do what we promised or what voters wanted to get done, and now we are here.
Which makes you wonder where the real power is at the Capitol.
And that's problematic. If it's going to go to a vote of the people, you're going to want to listen to them and do what they want. And it came back, I think, a little more toothless than a lot of folks were expecting.
And the net result is we have egg on our face internationally right now. It looks bad. And again, if we have a passage of medical marijuana, I suspect that a lot of that is going to go down, but we're really not addressing at all very well the mental health issue of it. When we've got sheriffs who are telling us that as many as 90% of their inmates have some type of mental health issues, and we've got prison guards who are being dramatically underpaid and certainly aren't qualified to be mental health professionals.
And overworked.
I mean, this is a problem. Our mental health facilities have become jails. That's a problem.
Speaking of people that have a commanding presence, you mentioned Albaugh. Have you ever had the temerity to ask him why that George W. Bush nicknamed him Big Country?
I have not.
All right, and I'm not going to ask. Not in his presence. Maybe if he listens to this, he'll tell us why that he got the nickname. You did a story the other day with Chris West, who's a sheriff in Canadian County, right. And these guys are straight shooters, and they have a commanding presence. I'm just wondering if you, you're a recent import for several years now, right?
About 3 years.
You see, we started off talking about campaign strategies, sometimes laying low. I agree with you guys. I think probably it's Todd Lamb and somebody else, right? I'll be waiting to see when, of the top 3, somebody starts attacking somebody besides Todd Lamb, or somebody starts to attack somebody. That's a signal,
right,
that somebody's doing really well.
It's got to happen soon.
My question is, we see the success that people have in terms of persuasiveness of the Joe Albaughs and Chris West. Why don't more people do it?
I don't know. That's a really
They're really good, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they're straight shooters. When you talk to Chris West, you know you're getting the real deal without it, the bark on, right?
It's not going to be sugar-coated. And I don't know why we don't have more of the political types here in Oklahoma doing that. That's what Oklahomans want. I tell people all the time when I'm interviewing them, people who don't want to go on camera for whatever reason, I say, look, this is Oklahoma. People want to look into your eyes and they want to hear what you have to say. You can't just, shy away from it or send me a press release or something. People want to look in your eyes. And I think that's the reality of people like Joe Alba and Chris West. You know where you stand with them because you're looking into their eyes. So many times we have politicians. We kind of talked about that last week a little bit in terms of the inefficiency with which a lot of politicians here in Oklahoma communicate, or in many cases don't communicate with the press. They want to look in your eyes, man.
Interesting you bring that up. I was just looking through my Twitter feed, which is where I see a lot of your stories. The latest one was 7 minutes ago from OK Senate GOP. It says OK Senate members representing Edmond participate in a legislative update. Now, it's not that there's not any news in this, but we talked about a couple, 3 weeks ago that Greg Treat, Senator Treat, the incoming pro tem, was going to be ratcheting up the external communications from the Senate GOP, and it looks like it's happening.
Which is good. And Greg Treat gets it, man. He was a little bit uncomfortable in front of the media initially. Now when he sits down with us, he's joking around before the cameras roll, and he's showing us a bit more of his personality. That's kind of what we need to see from a lot of these politicians. John Eccles, after your last podcast, John Eccles called me up and beat me up mercilessly because I didn't give him enough credit for talking to the media. John Eccles is among the best when it comes to talking with the media. And
I thought you did a pretty good job of giving props to Eccles.
I thought so too, but he's a politician. But when you go over his head, and you're talking with McCall. McCall is an extremely likable guy when you sit down and chit-chat with him one-to-one, but he doesn't like being in front of the camera.
It's been my contention that GOP communications have not really shown folks who Charles McCall is. I mean, this is an Atoka boy, and he's loved in that community down there, and you see the photographs of the suit and the tie. There's even that bank down there, those guys wearing blue jeans and shirts and interacting with the community. Sometimes people like the Joe Albas and Chris West show their personality. Their messages come interspersed with their personality, and too many guys don't do that. Sanders, you know who he is from his communications, who's the very best in the GOP in terms of using social media, for example.
Yeah, agreed.
So it's very, very interesting. We've been talking about influentials as we start winding down this podcast, which is now on Fridays, and we appreciate people that are listening to this. We think we're filling a void that was out there in terms of helping people ratchet up what's going on. So let me turn to this one. If there's nothing else on the table right now, I'd love to ask you guys, are you starting to see, our first podcast we talked about who's going to be the influencers. Are you beginning to see some trends as to who could be driving this debate? Everything going down the road.
Which debate?
Medical marijuana, governor, state legislative races. Who is seizing the opportunity to help people understand what's going on? If anybody.
I think
present company excluded from the folks who aren't doing it, but we know what's going on here. Facebook Lives. Ryan Welton's just great. I mean, he keeps pumping stuff out in social media. If you don't watch TV regularly, you still get the News9. It's digital media. New media is taking over. Let's just be frank about this. Legacy media is going through some changes, and they're on life support in some regards. So we began talking about influentials and who's going to be influencing. Thoughts about that?
I think you're John Eccles and the ones we spoke about last week, the people that regularly talk with the media. But we're seeing, and I think that we're going to see a lot more younger faces within the legislature, people who know how to use social media to their advantage to get their message out. I think that a lot of them are going to be pulling a Trump and kind of bypassing the media altogether and putting their message directly to the people. To name names is kind of tough right now. We don't know what's going to happen after the primaries, but we're seeing a lot of younger blood coming in.
And I don't know if there are that many influencers out there right now. I would say, now that specifically with the marijuana question, now that the churches have gotten involved, I think you'll see a lot more pastors and priests and ministers starting to work on people's opinions, massage them as they can legally do. But really, we haven't seen a lot of folks step up and lead opinion just yet, and that's probably because these things are early, and some of the questions, as far as the state questions go, people kind of know where they fall already, and they're only fighting over a small middle. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of those influencers show up until after the primaries.
What about the 18 to 34 demographic?
That's me.
They going to vote?
I think so. I think you talk to a lot of people in my age. I'm 26, so you talk to people in that cohort, and they're fired up. And it's because of the national politics. A lot of millennials don't read local news. They're detached from it, whether it's because of work or it's because they don't have cable or whatever it is. They just don't. But they are up on the national stuff. And that will trickle down as we get closer to November into the state stuff. I think you'll see a turnout higher than they have been in the past. Not record-setting, not higher than, I think any other cohort, but I think higher than in the past.
They're also very issue-based. So if you ask your typical 18 to 34-year-old, what do you think of Kathy Costello? They're going to scratch their head. But when you ask them, what do you think of medical marijuana? There's going to be an opinion. So I think that we're going to see a pretty good turnout primarily because of 788 during the primaries. And like we had talked about before, there's a reason that they decided to put 788 on the ballot for the primaries as opposed to the general, because they know there's going to be a much larger, younger Democratic turnout for it. We'd much rather have those during the primaries than during the general.
Also pushing, I think, specifically Democratic turnout, but maybe turnout in both parties, is the education vote. You've got a lot of young teachers and a lot of young spouses of teachers and sons and daughters of teachers. And I think that will push Oklahomans to state ballots a lot harder than some of the national issues might, and maybe even more than medical marijuana, but I'm not going to go that far and say definitely.
And I'm sure a lot of the power brokers are hoping that come general election, that gets kind of forgotten about.
Sure. It's also one of those groups that are easy to target by the power brokers because we're closest to being in school.
Right.
We remember being in a classroom, and we were the most recently in the classroom and saw these changes. Somebody in the 45 to 60 voter block has not been in school for some time, and school is a very different place.
And every month that you get that bill from your college, you're reminded of it.
Exactly.
I'll give you a name on influentials, and I'm just rolling through my Twitter feed, which I don't know. You guys depend on your feed as much as I do? I mean, I really get a lot of my news from my feed.
It's the first thing I look at in the morning.
Okay.
Yep.
Jill Castilla from Edmond, Citizens Bank Edmond. She is just recently was one of the Community Banker of the Year across the country. She's the inventor of Herd on Herd. She's got this incredible bank. They do lots of programs at Tower Theater, by the way.
In fact, they were involved with that debate that we just had.
They were. She was there, by the way. And she's retweeting stories like the prison story about the incarceration rate. People like it. And by the way, when she does tweet, she's got 13,500 followers.
Wow.
And those people are following her because they want to hear what she has to say. Which, by the way, I should also say that she's Army veteran and has a child at West Point, which makes her a Lombardi fan, which makes her a Packer fan. I just wanted to work that all through.
Boo.
Nice work.
But I would say that people like this, to me, are starting to emerge. Bankers usually don't talk about incarceration rates, okay? But she's part of the culture in Edmond and statewide. And this is the sort of thing I'm starting to watch. Folks that aren't politicians, folks who are not in the media, but folks who are saying rational thinking things and starting to influence people. They're going to be people introduced to the incarceration issue because Jill is retweeting stories.
And that might be something that I know I don't have a lot of insight into the business sphere in Oklahoma, especially the crossover, the Venn diagram of politics and business. A lot of that gets done away from our eyes, Aaron and mine, but I know you're involved in that a lot. Do you see influencers emerging from that group? Those are the people with the money. They matter.
Yeah, and they're purple.
Absolutely.
And they're purple.
They bet on all the horses. That's why. But
yeah. But they certainly are. There are people who are now embracing social media they may be influential in their life, in their circle, but this expands their circle, the Twitters and the Facebooks and all of this. And speaking of that, let me take one cultural thing before we get out of here. It's Dead Center weekend. And if people have not seen Dead Center, by the way, it's not totally finished, but there's a new Mitchell Talks podcast called Candish, Kandish. It's done by Candace Mitchell, if you're following her. I know her really well. And
have you guys met?
I've met her. A little, right? Yeah.
I've met her. I got 3 people that also know that we've met. So the point is, she's doing these podcasts you find at Mitchell Talks on our website. But here's the thing. There's this cultural war breaking out between the movie industry and some of these advocacy groups. One advocacy group goes, well, we've got a $5 million film rebate, something like that. Okay, now, in terms of a $7 billion budget, something like that, it's
chump change.
It's worse than that. And they're trying to take that $5 million and tie it to it that this money is somehow going to Harvey Weinstein. Have you seen this?
I've seen this.
Okay. So at a level, and by the way, this is going to be bringing in tons of people this weekend. Hotels are full. There are people who have jobs like Brian Gilliland, who does sound for all of these movies that come through Oklahoma. And they're really trying to put this industry to sleep. And this is a cultural thing. By the way, Harvey's not cashing any state of Oklahoma checks. That is pure deal. You can do your tomatoes with some food on that, right? But do you see culture wars expanding in Oklahoma because we're turning a little more purple, and things like the movie rebate, which works, by the way, are starting to happen?
I think so. And I think that dovetails into what Aaron said about 18 to 30-year-old voters, is that issue-based voting is becoming a much larger part of how people decide what they decide at the ballot box. And the culture war in Oklahoma is changing because we're getting more millennials. Those people are coming of age to vote, and it'll happen with Generation Z after millennials as well, where that'll probably intensify. We haven't quite seen that yet. They're not quite of voting age just yet. But I think they will continue as older generations phase out, as Oklahoma moves to a more secular-driven generation. That's also happening. It's not talked about a lot because it's very, very slow because this is still Oklahoma, but it is happening. I think the generational shift is causing some of that kind of issue-based, war.
As older generations phase out, Scott, he's talking about old guys like us croaking.
I know.
I could have used expire. Did you guys prefer to be talked about like dairy? What?
Let me go on, because when Doherty was here, I was on the record. I haven't got on the record with Hermes yet, but he just mentioned he's 26 years old. He's an anchor in the morning program. He's handsome. And I wanted to say to you right now, Grant, I hate your guts.
That's all right.
Yeah, so I really dislike you. When you've got somebody this talented, this handsome, and they're less than half your age, it really just ruined my day.
You got nice glasses, though.
Yeah, that's true.
When I'm as old as Grant, I hope that I have the same level of success.
I do, too.
I'll help.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You come under my wing.
If you know somebody, if you can kind of point me in the right direction.
In all seriousness, I appreciate you guys doing this. This is picking up some speed, and it's because you guys are participating, and that's exactly why. And we're going to be putting this on Mitchell Talks Facebook page. News9 is now sharing it on their Facebook page.
Awesome.
Ryan Welton is doing that. We're on Twitter. I'm at Mitchell Talks.
Grant Hermes, KWTV.
And just email me. I'm kind of old-fashioned. Aaron Brilbeck at news9.net.
So nobody can DM you?
You can DM me.
Okay.
Just slide in. It's all right.
Yeah. M is in the letter before N. Is that right?
Yes.
Exactly how it works. All right, we thank you for listening. I hope you'll head out to Dead Center this weekend. By the way, it's not just Hollywood type stuff. There are faith-based movies. There are kid movies. There are Oklahoma filmmakers there. The Oklahoma Shorts are going on this weekend. Alfre Woodard is in town. There's going to be Ricky Lake is in town. She's got a movie that deals with the 788 issue.
Really?
Trying to get an interview with Ricky Lake, and it's something to see. If you haven't been to people go, the name sounds like a hippie convention, right? We're in the dead center of the United States. That's what it's all about. So Lance McDaniel, all those folks that put that together down there, we really appreciate it.
It's one of my favorite events that we have here, bar none, at any time of the year. I'll go every year. It's so much fun.
Give me Ricky Lake's autograph, would you?
I'll try to do that. Thank you both.
Thank you.
You're listening to the new media, the Mitchell Talks Network. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter at MitchellTalks.